probably start with time in mind, because we're trying to keep this at an hour long meeting. And I really appreciate everyone that's been joining us and participating, whether it's committee members or city staff, every week on a weekly basis, for it is a big commitment. And I really appreciate it. I know our Vice Chair, Al White, really appreciates it also. So with that, let's start the meeting. It's 4:02. And first thing on the agenda is concerning the sharing of Microsoft Teams recording on the city website with Shannon Anderson.
Thanks, Charlie Odegaard. I just wanted to ask this team if you were okay with us adding that as a link to the city website where we're posting the agendas as well as the presentations. I know they're not as refined or formatted as good as those council meetings that we record and stream, but it still would be an opportunity to share the information that we're sharing with these committee members for the public. It's been requested, so I said I would check in and kind of see what you all thought would be good. So that's my question for you all. And please let me know if you have any follow-up questions or additional information that you'd like.
Okay, thank you, Shannon. And we're gonna go try to keep it orderly. I got a hand raise, or there's a chat box that people can say yes or no or have any questions. And with I see the hand raise, I'm gonna hand it to Michelle James.
Great, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I really believe that very strongly that we need to make the recordings available to citizens. I've had people contacting me who wanted to be on the committee, and I know that there were limitations on how many people we wanted to have, which I totally get, and they would really like to be following what's happening, particularly with these beginning meetings where there's just information presented. And I think as a Citizens Bond Committee, it's our responsibility to communicate very clearly with the citizens, and having those be available for the few who will actually spend the time looking at it, I think is very, very important. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. Anybody else has a comment? I'm sure our vice chair, he's not afraid with words.
I love it. I'm writing my comment for the meeting chat, and I just popped it in there now. So yeah, I vote yes too. I think it's really, and all the presentations that we've had should be out there and should be available. I mean, they may generate more questions than they answer, but I think that to err on the side of more transparency is much better. So thanks.
Then I have one from Paul Byer, one of the committee members, says, I'm happy to share all recordings. And as far as my thoughts, I said this from the beginning, I want this to be as very transparent as possible. And I think the city council that wanted this committee wants that also. And so thank you, Shannon. I know it's a little legwork on everything, but it is much appreciated. We've had, as Vice Chair White has said, we've had some really good presentations, and I think it'd be very helpful for everyone to see. Reading the chat box, Tad Moore, I agree it should be shared. Also, committee member from Kara House, I'm in agreement. Transparency to the public we're speaking on behalf will be very important to this process. So, and I see Joe Washington joined us. And so I think, do you have direction, Shannon, at this point?
I do. Thank you, Chair Odegaard.
Real quick, Shannon, the items that are in the meeting chat, are they're included in the recording? So if someone goes on and takes a look at what we've done, they have that little bar down below that no, they can't.
I don't think so. I will double check when I download the recording tonight. Yeah, Stacy's confirming no.
Yeah.
I don't think they're able to see that. And so I appreciate that Chair Odegaard has been verbalizing what folks are putting in the chat, because then it just becomes part of the recording.
Thanks, and I'll do that on the occasion that I chair a meeting as well, because you want to make sure that those comments get out there. Good, thank you.
Thanks for the direction.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair White. And I'll just reiterate concerning that, once it's out there, these recordings from another committee members, just we would like to make it as easy as shareable as possible, yeah, as a link or something. And yes, I've been trying to read all the comments just so people can hear them. That's in that chat box with questions. Um, from Jason Schaefer as guest, yes, information should definitely be shared and transparent. And then also from committee member Michelle James, I agree with Kara. We are talking about this before the meeting has started, and Shannon will be sharing with the committee. So great, thank you. And let's move on to our next agenda item. It's concerning any questions or answer to any questions that we can had concerning public infrastructure, meaning public safety with Flagstaff Fire and also police department. I know we had a presentation with fire last week. Thank you to Chief Wilson for getting it all in a timely manner. And we were holding off questions until today's meeting, just to try to keep time in mind. I know Mr. Ghetto had a question from last week, and if my memory corrects, with that question was, has fire or anything with equipment, apparatus, especially like trucks, can they be by used? And I'm sure Chief Wilson saw that same comment from last week, and hopefully he's here to answer it. I think he's here. So I'll turn it over to Chief Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Odegaard, Vice Chair White, members of the committee. Mark Wilson, Deputy Chief. Certainly I can answer that question. What I will do real quick is just pop up this final version of the recap so that we can reference that. And I think to answer your question directly, we actually have gone down this road in years past. We tried to look at purchasing what's called a refurbished option. So it takes an older piece of apparatus that's gently used, and then you refurbish it and equip it with a lot of new equipment. And I can tell you that that was a fairly unsuccessful event for a couple reasons. One is they only last up to 8 to 10 years. The engine is up to 20. And then also some of the actual equipment, the layouts, the safety preparation of it is antiquated. And so we actually spent more in the first 4 years on that refurbished unit than we did in any of the others during that same time. And so the cost savings just really weren't there. Although you don't have that upfront sticker shock, and it looks like it's a good thing, the ongoing maintenance, repair, and the biggest thing for us was the downtime. That unit was inside our fleet facility 60% more than any other engine as a result of trying to buy something older. So we've done that, we look at it, and we certainly have a lot of insight into why that was a challenge. Does that answer your question?
Well, it definitely answers my question, but I look at things on a portfolio basis where some of our equipment could be brand new and some could be gently used. And on a weighted basis, we're not going through so much pain constantly upgrading. I just wanted to figure out if it was a black or white situation and if maybe there was a shade of gray in between. But I hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of our process in including this is we extend these out and replace these staggered so that you don't hit with those big price tickets. That's part of our overall general fund. We just happen to have 5 units here that exceed that capacity. But thank you for that, Mr. Ghetto.
Yeah, I have to say it was embarrassing to see 22, 23-year-old equipment. And I've sat next to some of those pumpers and seen the rust coming off the side. So I know I respect that this is a need. And I'm just trying to figure out how we get all of our needs met. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ghetto, and thank you, Chief Wilson. We do have a couple of hand raised up, and I'll go to the first one that raised her hand was Dara Marks Marito, another committee member.
Great, thanks so much. And actually, I also wanted to say thank you for your attempts on working with refurbished materials, even though it wasn't as successful as you maybe hoped it would be. I've got 3 quick questions for you. One is, what kind of fuel does your equipment run on?
Predominantly, we're diesel based. Some of
Okay.
our smaller fleet is gas, and we're looking into hybrids and other options as we move forward. Part of the price index for one of our engines right here is based off of the potential for a hybrid, which is not available yet, but that's part of this concept as we work through carbon neutrality with the city.
And actually, you predicted my next question, which was going to be, have you looked into any electric? I understand you're looking into some hybrid electric, it must be, but that must not be on this list here. Is something you're looking at for the future, it sounds like.
Yeah, so the electric we certainly looked at. As you know, there is an electric prototype that's out there that is in LA County. It's an electric engine. There's some questions in regards to its ability as it's managed outside here in the cold and the temperatures, and how that would maintain over a long period of time. But I think as those prototypes continue to be in place, we'll see more and more of that. So every single thing that we're looking at, whether it's a fleet replacement, goes through that process for carbon neutrality. And in this in particular one of the engine costs that we have on there is currently in the price range of a hybrid, which would be the first one of its kind in our area.
Okay, so if that were available, you're saying that if that were available, it would be a similar cost, but as of right now, it's not available.
So let me qualify. In the cost predicted here in the screen, that includes that unit, because we're looking at 1.5, probably years out. We know that's available. Everything right now is on a 2-month wait list, but we know they're in production as we speak today. They're just, they're 2 years behind, a 2-year wait list. So if we get in that queue, we would be able to do that with this engine, not the Quint.
Okay, thanks. My last question for you, and maybe I just missed it in the presentation last week. I had to sign off a few minutes early, but do you have a prioritization list? I know these are all your priorities. Do you have like a hierarchy of priorities within this list?
That's a really great question, Ms. Dara, because I think it depends on a lot of factors, but we feel like if there was a priority based off of where things are sitting right now, the Quint would be a very high priority for us because we see those elevated structures coming throughout the community. That's probably a very, very high number one. It's a dead heat tie with the Type 3 wildland engines that are so old that we utilize throughout the wildland season, and that Type 1 for number 2.
So if I could make a request then, and this would be both for you as well as any future presentations that we receive with requests, if the prioritization could kind of go into the records that we're seeing and that we're determining or making our decisions based off of, that'd be a really helpful metric, I think, for us.
Absolutely. And just to qualify, the list that you have here, that is our prioritized list. And so it includes, and I know you're aware of that, it just gets really hard to dice up if there was one, because we're still landing with 20-plus-year-old units. So we will put something together and try to get an answer for you, Ms. Dara.
Thanks. That'd be really helpful. I mean, like, as we all know, there's no way we're going to be able to fund absolutely everything. So knowing like the priorities within each department would be, I think, a helpful point. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. Good questions. As a reminder, after the questions get answered, if people can lower their hand raised, and then if they do have another question, please raise it again. We're here to make sure all questions get answered. Excuse me, Vice Chair White, I'm going to go with one of our other committee members first, and then I'll come back to you. And so
I have a number of questions, so yeah.
Okay,
that's
so
fine.
let's go Devonna McLaughlin.
Thank you, Chair Odegaard. I appreciate the presentation, Chief Wilson. I have a few questions, and so I'm hoping you can remind me and the committee what the useful life of the communication equipment was when we bought it and where we're at now.
Absolutely. Thanks, Devonna, for the question. So when we purchased that in the original, it has a 7-year hardware lifespan. So 7 to 10, we're at 10 years right now on those communication equipments. The software can be updated until they hit to that 7 to 10 year range. And then at that point in time, the technology has changed such that the Motorola, who we base our information and our communications through, they are no longer able to update software and to continue to work on those. So 7 to 10 years is that window, and we're at 10 years right now.
And so I guess knowing that there was a horizon on the communication equipment, I'm confused why we haven't been putting aside 1/10 of the cost for the last 10 years.
It's another great question, Ms. Devana. I think that there's a lot of requests that go into the hopper, and some of those rise to the top. Some of those there's higher needs, but we certainly, I know PD's been trying to replace some as they go along. We've been replacing wildland equipment and communications during that same time, but we certainly go through that process every single budget year, but we have not asked for a full replacement cycle at this point. Chief Gaylord, looks like you want to weigh in.
Yeah, I do. It's a great question, and quite honestly, the condition of the general fund over the last, and I'm just going to speak to my time here, about a little over 8 years, has been such that there hasn't been an ability to fund progressive kinds of funding mechanisms like capital replacement funds and vehicle replacement funds. We certainly support those types of mechanisms to try to take the, if you will, the peaks and valleys off of capital fund purchasing. We just haven't been able to achieve that across the general fund. And you may have heard Chief Wilson talk about the fleet management committee effort that goes on at the city, and that's necessitated by the fact that we don't have the capital resources in a pay-as-you-go way to fund those type of mechanisms. We love those concepts, but our experience in the general fund here in Flagstaff is we haven't been able to pull that off. And perhaps if Rick Tatter is online, he can kind of talk a little bit more about that.
Devana, did your question?
Sorry, I wasn't sure if Rick was going to come in there.
Okay.
So then I guess my other question is, I understand that we have impact fees for development that should go to fund equipment purchases and capacity increases for development as it comes along. So I'm wondering, it feels like that obviously isn't meeting the needs for additional fire trucks, for example. Is that going to some other use? Is it being budgeted for the future? It feels like the answer to fund these capital expenses is to go back to the voters every so many years. And I'm just wondering if that's the answer, or if there's a different funding mechanism that could keep the peaks and valleys funded while still making sure that our public safety has the equipment they need.
Another good point. I'll just and this is a common kind of issue for us as far as, well, what can we use development impact fees for? And development impact fees are a funding mechanism to deal with the capital impacts to public safety, or I'll speak to fire services provision. But it has to be squarely rooted on new development. And we've been discussing city services quite extensively this week in the leadership team in a real strategic discussion. And the dilemma with development impact fees is you get one bite at the apple. And so development drives the expansion of a resource in that area, and you can use development impact fees. And we're leveraging impact fees to the extent possible to address new growth. Everything you see in front of you here is replacing existing equipment, or if you will, an existing service level. Development impact fees are not available to us to replace equipment that's already in the fleet. So the funding mechanisms very traditionally are bonds. And if the community has the wherewithal and prioritizes vehicle replacement, as you mentioned already, that's another way that I've seen this type of expenditure completed without the use of bonds. But so very often, this is exactly where we're at because of the large expense that's required to put the service on the street. But good point, development impact fees are a tool. We do use that to the extent possible. This piece of the equipment, or this equipment listed in this request, is not eligible for the use of development impact fees. Thanks.
Thank you.
I want to go back to Devonna McLaughlin. Do you think Rick Tatter in the chat box said he's available? You think if Rick could provide any more information than what you've received already?
Sorry, I muted myself and couldn't find the button. I think that's clear. It feels like there's some constraints to the general fund, but my only concern is if these items don't make it to the ballot, is there a backup plan to get these needs met? And it doesn't feel like there is. Is that what I'm hearing as my final question?
And could either Chief Gaylord or Chief Wilson, or maybe even Rick Tatter answer that question? Is there a backup?
I'd like to pass to Mr. Tatter.
I'll go ahead and catch that pass for you.
All right, thank you, Rick.
Yeah, really it's a matter of the annual budget process and finding the resources to complete the priority needs of our community. And like has been mentioned, the general fund has a lot of needs within it, from parks to community development to police, fire, and so forth. So on an annual basis, we haven't really had the growth to commit these levels of investments. As we go through the budget process this year and each year, we do occasionally have some one-time money capacities that the budget team and council could direct to fund. And as these become an even higher priority over the time, we will have to make those hard decisions of what needs to get funded. If we have to spend $6 million on equipment because it is really failing, becomes the higher priority, and we'll have to decide, is there something else that falls out in the budget process, or something else we can't do? It's kind of a give and take that we have to go through each year to balance these resources. But nothing definitive yet. Right now we have a set aside for fleet. It is about $750,000 a year. But when you're talking about all those departments I expressed, that's a lot of vehicles, and it just doesn't meet the need. And we really do need to probably look at increasing that amount on an annual basis. That is one tool that the budget team could look at, and the council could look at, as far as increasing that annual allocation. It's definitely something we'll talk about this year, the February retreat that's on our list, and balancing our 5-year plan. So that may have been a little long-winded, but hopefully that got you the answer you need.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. And I'll turn it over to Vice Chair White, who has some questions.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So Devonna, I too had written some notes about impact fees. My recollection on impact fees they were established back in like 2010. I know I voted on those. They've been increased once in between. If we don't intend to get rid of the old equipment that we're replacing, it could be argued that the equipment that we're buying now is to accommodate growth, and having the Quint prioritized as one of the top needs, based on the fact that now we have buildings that go 6 stories, and you need to be able to reach those. I think an investigation on the impact fees is called for. We should, at some point in time, Rick, know what we've collected, what it's gone towards, what have we used it for, I think a lot of people in the community believe that this is something that helps growth pay for itself, and since fire and safety is such a huge priority, that the purchase of equipment is part of what those impact fees are used for. And I know this that there are rules regulating it, but I think that it would be very, very beneficial to trying to sell this argument to the public in the future to show what impact fees have done, what we've been able to do with them, and why, if they're not adequate for this project, then this project suddenly becomes a little bit more pressing for voters to consider. I also, Devonna, was curious about a contingency. If the voters say no, what do we have for a plan? And I think that would be an important thing to notice when we do our public awareness as well, that the need for the quint especially is there based on how tall our buildings are. I have a question for the chief, and that is, are building heights determined by what we can reach with a quint?
They're not. The building heights are not determined by that, and in fact, it is allowable for construction to currently exceed the heights of the available ladder service provided. And I'll say this: there are height restrictions, but they are not based upon the ability to get to the top of for instance, put a ladder to the top of a building.
Right. So are sprinklers required for anything that's built higher than what the quint will reach?
Yes. Sprinklers and built-in protection are required. And what we see is the necessity of the development of elevated streams for firefighting. And particularly if we have elevated buildings, and also just as we move the community risk upward from ground floor development, the resources of a quint, which brings more resources, the ability for elevated streams, the ability to put firefighters at heights that are above ground floor access and so forth, that really is what's driving the overall need for the quints. We're developing a higher risk environment in the air in our community. We're taking a single family, and we call Mrs. Smith a customer. We say we're taking Mrs. Smith out of a single family dwelling, and we're putting her on the 5th floor. More resources are required from a fire protection standpoint. The elevated streams and the elevated firefighting capability become necessary. We also have to do that to maintain affordable insurance in the community as well. Just kind of, if I can, I think Rick might have a little bit more information. I would want you to know that, we have, because of the growth, we have necessitated the need to provide ladder coverage in 2 locations in the city. We are able to attribute one location as growth related because of the development of the high-rise buildings in the community. So we have been able to do that. We are going to defer those expenses over on the development impact fees. It doesn't take care of the existing 20-year-old ladder truck. And these are the things that we are able to do. We've used it to extend rescue coverage. We have used development impact fees successfully. We're going to see the extension of the community's growth area as the J.W. Powell corridor, which is currently investigating right now. We're trying to determine the ultimate alignment of it. It will necessitate the addition of a fire station for that future growth area. That certainly lends itself to the fire station, and any of the equipment that goes into it is really ripe for consideration for inclusion into the development impact fee program. where we see this, what you see in front of you, these costs are base level of service currently in existence that's aging out and needs to be replaced and can't be attributed to growth.
So let me suggest that, are you going to get rid of the old equipment? Does that disappear? Is that part of a trade-in, or do you maintain that as well as backup? Because I would argue that that if you maintain that and hang on to it, then the new stuff basically is to help us grow our ability to serve a growing community.
I wouldn't disagree with that at all. I think what you see for us is we will keep some equipment in reserve status so that we can, when we have breakdowns and or any other reason it takes a piece of equipment out, we can move in reserve engines and Quint into place. Or we do not have that luxury with Quints at the moment, simply because we are running them out of 2 first due locations in the community, and we only have 2. So there is no reserve Quint. But
right, so
we wouldn't argue that, and our plan is to keep one of the Quints in a reserve status. But quite honestly, the other one is costing us money just sitting in the firehouse, which we would like to have it gone.
So I think that adds a little bit to my argument, Rick, that or to my request about some kind of an accounting or assessment of impact fees and what we've been able to do with them, in so that we can show that that what we're trying to do here has to actually go above and beyond. Anyway, I'll get off of that subject. If I could offer a small opinion on priorities. I think that your wildfire has long been acknowledged as the primary risk to our community, and so the priority for those wildfire replacements is to me a higher priority. On the radio equipment, do we have anybody sharing the cost of that? Other agencies, the county, who uses that to communicate around the Flagstaff and the surrounding area, and do they participate in? Are we solely responsible for its upkeep? And can we show that that we share that cost with somebody else?
Yes, Vice Chair White, Police Chief Dan Mussman, I'll take this question. So we do share the microwaves. So part of this request is to replace a microwave. And I believe our estimate we got was roughly $43,000. The city's portion of that's going to be $30,000. NAU will cover their portion. The rest of the radios, the handheld and portables, that is all city equipment. That's all in the police cars, the fire engines, and the portables. These ridiculous things here that are $7,000 to $8,000 a pop because of all the stuff they do.
My God.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess, let's see, I had a couple more. One was about the bays. Yeah, I was around for the 2004 bond issues, and I don't recall at that time or any time after that up to 2012 when I left the council, a conversation about the fire stations not having the adequate bays, and we had to cut that out at that time. Is that not something that really has been determined to be an additional need since that time? I guess if that's the case, could that not be applied to an impact fee, development impact fee proviso?
Yeah, I'll take that one, Vice Chair White. So yes, what happened on that was we had a predetermined allotted amount for those facilities. As we sat in that pre-project and building meeting, we decided and determined, because of the cost of materials, we were at the peak before the recession hit in 2007, that we had to reduce the footprint and the cost overall of those stations before we could kick that project off. So as a result, one bay was taken off of those stations to be able to begin the build out of those as we moved in. So that's where that occurred as a result of really just anticipated cost to get the project off. The second part of your question, do I think fire apparatus bay could fit into impact fees? I think there is a discussion that it could fit into it because we do have an extended and expanded fleet that's coming as a result of increased growth and needs. But I will say that it does point back to several of our stations have one less bay, which means two less apparatus spaces between each of those. So that's 6 bay spaces, if you will, for each apparatus that we lost. So I hope that answers it.
So what equipment is being stored outside now?
Outside currently, we have only 2 pieces of apparatus and smaller equipment. So like some of our SUVs, some of our non-pump related units. So some of our backup rescues, those are stored outside currently. What we're looking at is if we do not increase our storage and we pick up this additional quint as an example, this quint, that loses 2 bay space just because of the length of it. That's 2 more of these that now have pump capacity that would be going outside. So that's one example. I hope that answered your questions.
No, that's good. I think what I'm trying to do is demonstrate the needs in all of these circumstances. And then the last question that I have, and I'm sorry to take up so much of this time, is the contingencies, the 15% inflation. Do you have records of where we have gone over and other projects and had to go into our 15% inflation? First of all, 15% inflation is pretty high. And I noticed that in the next presentation, you got a 20% inflation built into to what kind of history do you have to show that you actually need that much set aside for contingency/inflation?
It's a great question. Obviously, inflation's an estimate. We don't know where it's going to go, right? So that's why it's sidelined on the actual cost. But I can give you real numbers. Last year, 2 years ago, we bought a Type 1 engine. In 2.5 years from the time that we bought one to the most recent one that we just ordered, we saw a 12% increase in cost. And that's just in 2.5 years. So I honestly don't know if 15% is accurate. It's the best guess we can. We used to use 3% for so many years. That's no longer realistic. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember 10% was always built into most of these projects. All right, well, thank you, and thanks for indulging my questions. Appreciate it.
All right, we'll move on to, we have a hand.
Chair White asked about our 20%. So what we did is we went out to some consulting engineers and some vendor reps to find out what current costs were escalating at. All of our prices have been going up, and the consensus was right around 20%.
Wow.
Okay, thank you for that information. Since this is a joint venture between police and fire, I would remiss not to ask Chief Musselman if there's anything he would like to add onto this subject.
Oh, thank you, Chair White. No, my brothers at the fire department, I feel covered everything pretty well. One question I'll go back to that Devonna asked, as far as we have replaced some of these radios as we've gone, but the ones that we've replaced at the time are the same model as the one that we currently have. So we replaced them, and yet they're still going to be going out of service. So, you know, if we run over them or they break, we won't be able to get parts for them. So moving forward, we do need to buy new ones, but they all don't go kaput all at once. They're still serviceable. They still work. It's not like tomorrow they're all going to turn off. It's just over the course of the next 10 years, we're going to have to replace them, and that cost is pretty pricey. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chief Musselman. So with that, I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we should move on to the next agenda item, is concerning public infrastructure and wastewater with water services. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Odegaard, Vice Chair White, and committee members. My presentation is going to take more than 15 minutes, and I want to check with you all to see if you want me to start and then continue next week, or if you want for me to push mine back to next week.
No, I say start since we do have time, and I'll let Greg Clifton chime in also.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Jim, for the comment. It occurs to me, as many of us have heard and seen this presentation before, that maybe it can be divided up. This goes to you, Jim. I'm wondering if you can segment out a portion of this that you can cover today, and maybe continue the discussion at the next meeting. If there's a logical break off, that would be convenient. Thanks.
I will do my very best to get us moving along and get through a few of the projects, and then we can continue on next week.
Okay, perfect.
So we're going to be talking about wastewater and the projects for the wastewater facilities. Just so you all know, we're an enterprise fund, and our funding comes from the sewer and water and sewer rates, mostly from the sewer rates for the wastewater. So we have 10 projects that we need to fund. Some of them have no funding, some of them have partial funding. So that's kind of how we broke out this list. What I will do to go back and answer the need, I will come back and put numbers in on this slide and give it back to Shannon so that she can pass it back out for priority. So the first project we have is at the Rio de Flag, which is over by Sam's Club. This facility was installed in 1993. The mechanical bar screens have been running for pretty much since they've been installed. We rotate back and forth, but for the most part, what they do is they pull out large debris that comes down in the sewer, 2x4s, t-shirts, things that can hurt the plant, and then they take that and put it in a dumpster. It was about a year and a half ago, or right around the start of COVID, we had a manufacturer come in who inspected both of the units, and they said that the structure of them are in really good shape, but the problem was that they needed to be upgraded and some components replaced due to their age. So this is a critical piece of equipment for us because we're planning on increasing the flows coming over here to Rio. And at that time, we might have to run both screens at the same time. Currently, we run one week, run the other one the other week. So the estimated cost for this project is right around $1.5 million. We have $1 million of that already funded through our CIP, but we need about $500,000 from the bond project. And again, the annual inflation, as I described earlier, we went out and we talked to a bunch of different people who are currently doing projects, and this is what they're seeing from the time that they design the project till the time they get to construction. The next project is over here at the Rio de Flag, and if somebody has a question, please feel free to interrupt me. Is for generators and an automatic transfer switch. When Rio was originally put in, it was designed as a relief plant. So if Wildcat couldn't handle the flows, that Rio would come online and take care of everything. Since that time, since 1993, it has become more of a permanent fixture and cannot be shut down. So in order for us to do that and meet regulations, we need to install a generator and some switch gears so that if we do happen to lose power, that we can run on generator power. So we've already talked to APS and some electrical contractors, and that's how we came up with our price for what this is going to be. And the reason that this is so critical, if the plant shuts down, our system is aerobic, so it works with oxygen. So we have blowers here that blow air into our microbiology. And if they don't have air for a certain amount of time, just like us, they will pass away. So it's not a good thing. And then at that point, it would take 6 weeks to bring the plant back up and online. At that time, all the flow would have to go out to Wildcat, which would cause permit issues out there. So this supports our resiliency initiatives that we were trying to do. So again, that's the generator project. The next one are turbo blowers. So a few years ago, back in 2017, we installed some new blowers here at Rio. They're a little oversized for what we're doing right now. So what we want to do is put these the turbo blowers in to work.
Jim,
Go ahead.
we do have, I guess someone, again, for questions, again, raise your hand or also put in the chat box, and I'm trying to monitor those. There was a question by, maybe, I don't know if really a question, but by Lisa Deem. Please ask questions at the end of each slide. But I don't see a question. And if maybe you could clarify that in the chat box. I will answer the next question by Mr. Ghetto, one of the committee members. What is Wildcat?
So Wildcat Hill is the wastewater treatment plant that's out on the east side of town. It's out behind the mall. It's out by, if you've ever gone out to Pitcher Canyon and you look over and you see the facility that's to the right, not the natural gas facility, that's Wildcat Hill.
Okay, thank you. And you might, I'd suggest just maybe slow down a little bit. And then if there's any questions, we'll catch them the best we can. Some of us, I'm very apt with everything you're talking about. I'm sure Chair White, just because we had the privilege of serving the community and a council member, and we've had these discussions and presentations and information concerning infrastructure. But most of our committee members have not. And so if you maybe could just, as with your presentation, just say, like the Wildcat, what is that? And so thank you.
No problem. Is there any other questions right now, Chair Odegaard?
I don't see any right now. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. So we'll go back to the turbo blowers, and again, I'll kind of refresh what I was talking about. So the current blowers that we have are a little too large. And what we do is we waste electricity because we have to blow off air just into the offline basin in order to not over aerate our bugs. Again, as we think about what we do in the wastewater plant, it's a lot like a human body. Too much oxygen is not just as bad as not enough oxygen. So this has a negative impact on our biological system. And again, it makes it harder for the operators to do treatment in the facility because they don't have any operational control. So this was identified in facility modeling and in the 2019 master plan. The balance of this operation of the facility really helps the operators run the facility to the best that we can, put out the best quality effluent that we can. This is also an energy improvement project because the turbo blowers run at a higher efficiency than the current blowers that we have. So again, it's an energy improvement project. So the project is estimated to be about $1.44 million, and currently none of it is funded. We don't have any plans for it. So we're asking from the bond, the 1.4 with the 20% annual inflation. Do we have any questions on that one?
Yes, we do. We have a question from one of the committee members, Dara.
Yeah, thanks. I'm curious, in 2017, why was that size chosen? Was it anticipated that it would be the right size? Is it dependent on how much flow there is? I'm just curious about that.
The three new blowers that we got were replacing kind of the blowers that were already in there. So whenever they designed the plant back in 1993, that was the size of blowers that they thought that we were going to need. Unfortunately, currently with the system that we have, that's just too much air for us.
And are there any predicted changes in the system that would then right size those blowers? Like, does it have to do with how much effluent is flowing, or yeah?
It has to do with how much influence. So how much the strength of the influent coming in and the amount of tankage that we have on. This would probably be our number 10 project of all the projects that we have. Because we're planning on bringing up the flow to this facility, probably about another 1 million gallons. And at that time, the current blowers might be suitable for what we need to do, but we don't know because we haven't been able to test that yet.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we do have another committee person that wants to ask a question? Al?
Well, I see Ron has asked a question, follow up to his what is Wildcat. So, and it's about the previous slide. So maybe you want to take that one first?
Sure. I'll let Mr. Ghetto ask his question.
Thank you. I don't know anything about Rio, but I do know a little about statistics and probability. We're asking for quite a bit of money for the possibility of something happening and to avoid the calamity of that happening. We all agree wastewater could end up as a calamity. But do we sit there and measure the probability and the expected damage of something happening so we can compare it to the cost of preventing it from happening?
So you're talking about more along the lines of risk. So yes, we do look at the risk of this. The risk of Rio shutting down, being offline for long enough that the bug population actually is killed off, that and that it'll take a minimum of 6 weeks to bring that plant back up online, which puts all the burden on Wildcat, which is already at capacity and can't handle the extra flow, which has the potential to lead to permit violations. Have an ADQ come in and talk about why we don't have this. And it is a regulatory requirement for a plant that's an end of the line plant, is what we call them, to have backup power.
How long has Rio been critical, though? And during this period, has it ever gone down?
It has. We had a transformer blow up. I'm thinking about 4 years ago. We contacted APS. We were offline for about 6 hours before they could replace the transformer and get everything back online. So we have lost power here before. We have lost power, just due to power failures around the plant. We had a transformer blow up on a pole just outside the facility, which took us down for about 2 hours while they were up there rewiring and putting in a new transformer. As long as they have the equipment, the downtimes are minimal. If the downtime goes much over 8 hours, we could start losing that bug population again, causing permit violations and other problems within the facility.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey, thank you. And before I get to you, Al, Stephanie had a question in the chat box. I just want to make sure I get answered. Do the blowers typically only last 4 to 5 years? Was it just the fact that they need to be replaced due to the error in size that they need to be replaced soon?
Well, and we're not going to replace the larger blowers. They will stay there in place because there will be times that we need to use those blowers. So we're not getting rid of that equipment. We're just going to add a little bit more equipment to it. And again, that equipment kind of is for the in-between times during lower flows. We don't need as much air in the aeration basins. And generally for wastewater plants, we try to keep that between 1 and 2 parts per million for the air, for the biomass. And so right now, overnight during low flows, we're putting in between 6 and 10, and we can't do anything to stop that. And it really just over oxidizes our bugs and causes us some other issues. And again, it makes it a little bit more difficult for the operators to run the facility.
Okay, thank you. And then Al has a question.
Yeah, well, my question has to do with some of the funding things I've seen on these slides. In certain slides, you have an estimated cost like this one, estimated cost of 2.16, funded 0, and then bond for that amount. Others, you have a certain amount in a fund, and then you're bonding for the difference. My question is this, and I know Rick explained a lot of the way bonds are repaid and the categories that they can come into for infrastructure and public safety and so forth and so on. Is it possible that we can repay bonds for wastewater infrastructure from the enterprise fund as time goes by? And does this indicate that maybe our rates aren't adequate?
So I'll let Rick answer some of that question if you're available, Rick. But I know that currently we are working on a rate study.
Yeah. So, and if you need time to put this answer together, and we can come back next time, because I realize we're at 4:57 now, and their hands still going up. So yeah, I mean, I don't have to have the answer right now.
Okay, thank you. Jim, what do you think we should do at this point? Should we stop here since?
If you have more questions, we can answer more questions. If Rick's around and he can answer the other question that Al just put forth, I'm good with that too.
Okay, thank you. And don't see any questions by any of the committee members at the moment, but if Rick's available and maybe can answer the question.
Yeah, I also see that Lisa Deem is online and has raised her hands. But it comes through a process of setting rates. We go through a capital improvement plan for a 10+ year. When we set those rates, things change over time from the time we address rates, and we find additional needs. And this is one where we have an opportunity to use general obligation bonds and sales tax to fund some of these needs within wastewater, which is allowable by state statute, versus a ratepayer. It could go both ways, but we are a little bit cautious or concerned about the magnitude of some of the projects coming up within the wastewater fund that could create a rather substantial increase to wastewater rates. And so we're trying to balance between the rates and how we fund some of these projects. That's why we are bringing these for this consideration at this time. Hopefully that answers the question. And Lisa, I don't know if you wanted to clarify anything else.
Yeah, and Lisa, I just wanted to apologize. I saw your hand go up, then it come down, then the hand come up and come down. So, so I apologize, Lisa, for that, and I'll let you speak. If you want to add anything?
I'm just here to provide supplemental information, and when we do issue bonds, they are repaid through our enterprise fund. So it isn't paid by the general fund.
Well, or it doesn't increase the secondary tax. I mean, for these, but in other words, I guess what I'm trying to show the average person who's out there voting and a taxpayer that their regular fees are going to cover these things, even though we're bonding for them now. If that's the case, if that's not the case, then and we need to make a rate adjustment, they need to know that too.
So there's two different things. We do have several bonds outstanding that are paid through revenues of the wastewater fund. But there's only so much capacity to issue debt within that fund to stay under the 25% debt policies we have. And so when we're talking about these projects with the bond council, we're asking to use secondary property tax revenues, not ratepayer revenues. So if these go forward, that's what we are asking the public to pay back these bonds with. There could be other projects that we need to do within a rate study that will be bond and rate paid. Just to clarify the two ideas.
And then to clarify your other question, Vice Chair White, was we have money in our capital improvement program for some of these projects, and that's why you see partially funded. But the funding was just not enough because we pushed the project back for several years. So now, due to the increase in cost of everything that we do, that's why we need the extra money to do these projects.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. With that, it's 5 o'clock or 5:01, and I just wanted to provide just a comment concerning the previous slide. A lot of things up about dollars available to take care of items of the need of the city. I know we had a little discussion last week concerning the public safety pension liability. That was a real struggle for the city in having those dollars to buy things that maybe need to be covered through the city without asking the voters. So that thing, that's been, I guess, put behind us. So it provides more clarity for budgeting in the city of Flagstaff. And then concerning fees, the last year that I was on council, we did raise those impact fees concerning public safety, just because there was a need and the need was justifiable. And so we did that as a council body the last year I was there. Vice Chair, before we move on, ending the meeting, do you have any comments you'd like to provide? I do have one last comment. I just remembered. Is there's a possibility, and maybe Miss Anderson could put a little poll or a little ask of the committee, if they ever the committee members would like to do kind of a field trip concerning some of these agenda items that we're wrestling over. I think that might be helpful. I know when I was elected, I took advantage of those trips to see the facilities throughout the city. And I think maybe there might be other members of the committee that might find it helpful in their decision-making process. And and I asked Miss Anderson maybe to do that this coming week to see if there's an interest. And so I'll turn it over to you, Vice Chair White.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot. I just wanted to remind Shannon that I'm still awaiting a list of the contacts for the people on this committee so that we can talk to each other. I don't think that's something we want to put out on for the public necessarily. I just think it would be nice to, so, you know, I want to call Steve Thompson, I got his contact information, that kind of thing. So thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then is there any comments from Miss Anderson or Mr. Clifton before we sign off?
Yeah.
I have one if I can jump in, and thank you, Chair. Looks like Shannon will provide that list. Although on that topic really fast, I just want to put out a cautionary comment. Let's be mindful of our transparency here and our desire, which I heard well articulated at the beginning of this meeting, our desire to be open to the public. The more we have offline conversations on that are substantive in nature, the less transparent we become. So just a comment on the issue of rates and a parallel discussion to the development impact fees, but on rates in particular as they pertain to utilities and specific to both water and wastewater. The ratepayers can never burden entirely the responsibility of capital upgrades to these systems. They are so inherently expensive, and the regulatory environment changes rapidly, and we keep up with that as being good stewards of the environment. But for a multitude of reasons, we simply cannot capitalize these improvements on the shoulders of the ratepayers. They certainly can contribute, as they have been, to the capital fund, as Jim noted. But I'll just share a comment, and it's one that's a truism amongst all municipalities, all local governments and water districts and so forth. It takes more than rates to cover these costs. I think there'll be more on that later. My suggestion, Chair, and for the rest of the group here, and thank you for a thoughtful discussion. It occurs to me where we have delved into a very technical area, much more technical probably than the presentations that have occurred to date, and it's going to get even more so. I'm wondering if it would behoove this group to have a little bit of more of an introductory background as to where is Wildcat, where is Rio, what's the connection, maybe a couple of aerials, maybe some to kind of take a step back and walk the group through the layout and the function of this utility as a precursor to the technical conversation that follows. I think the idea of field trips is wonderful. This is kind of adding on to that, perhaps in a more easier format. So that's my suggestion for the next meeting. I know those materials are available because I've seen Jim present them, Jim and Lisa. So that's my suggestion. Thank you.
I can definitely do that next time if that's what you would like. We can use the presentation that we gave to the city council. Greg, I think that's the one that you're referring to.
Yes, I'm at the pleasure of the committee here. If the committee thinks it's a good idea, we can certainly proceed with that. I think it's a call for you guys to make.
on this topics, and I see Dara with your hand raised. Maybe Dara, if you can provide a direction for that and for a question to try to wrap up quickly.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to that thought. I will never object to more information. I think that context is very important. But I'm also wondering if we have a roadmap for the amount of time that we need to receive all the information that we need to get to between now and when we need to be starting to make decisions. As we saw tonight, we ran out of time for the one presentation that we had because our questions took up so much time. So before we go and lengthen this presentation more, I would ask that the powers that be take a look at that roadmap and make sure that we actually have time for it.
Thank you. Good thought. And I see Miss Anderson has a question or a comment.
Yeah, just a quick response to that, Chair Odegaard. Dara, we do have a roadmap. I get a little concerned with how long all of these presentations will take at an hour at a time. And so we will be discussing that in more detail during our meeting scheduled for January 31st. So we will absolutely provide you with that roadmap and talk through any refinements that we need to make to the meeting schedule in order to ensure we get you all the information in order to start that work.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. And Vice Chair White had a hand raised.
Just really quick, should we run it past the group if we should schedule these meetings from 4 to 5:30 instead of 4 to 5? We may be able to cover everything we need to do. We may be able to, it might be a more wise use of our time. If you know, I mean, I'd be willing to do it and I'll offer that, but I don't know, I can't speak for everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. I think I'll let Mr. Clifton have those discussions among his team for this committee, and then Ms. Anderson could send out an email to ask the committee of do we need to lengthen our meetings to an hour and a half, for instance, if the roadmap that was mentioned will not cover everything. Because there is, as Mr. Clifton said, and which I why I kind of threw out the idea about doing a tour of the facilities, especially this topic is getting very technical. And so I'll let Mr. Clifton have those conversations with his team and then get back to us. It can be in an email form or maybe the first discussion of our next meeting that'll be placed next week at 4 o'clock on January 27th. And with that, I think I'm going to end the meeting just because of time commitment that we've all given ourselves. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a nice evening.
Okay.
Thank you.